You're listening to Trek FM.
Want to join in the conversation and share your thoughts on this episode? Join the Babel Conference, our listeners' discussion group on Facebook. Just type BABEL into the Facebook search field, and we'll look forward to seeing you there.
This is Steve Sansweet of Rancho Obi-Wan, and you're listening to the 602 Club.
Hello and welcome to the 602 Club, Trek FM's local watering hole, and I am just one of the hosts here, Matthew Rushing. So excited to be here. As like everybody these days, we're trying to escape New York, and with me, my fellow escapees, Christy Morris and John Mills.
Call me Castle Junkie.
Hello.
Oh gosh, man, it's great to have both of you guys back. And John, I gotta say a huge thank you, because you were the one who was like, well, there aren't any movies going out. What if we talked about this the last time you were on? And we were like, let's do it. So it gave us something fun to talk about. And I've never seen this movie.
Double plus.
Yeah.
Love it.
Wow.
Yeah, I know. So I'm really excited to dive into this one with both of you guys. And before we do that, Christy, did you know that we got a brand new review over there on the old Apple Podcasts?
No, that's awesome.
Yeah, this one is from Diner Kenobi, a Nerf burger for the soul, 5 stars. And they said, how did I find the 602 Club? Well, I'm afraid one night I had few too many fuzzy tauntauns over at the Outrider Club, and I stumbled out into the street hoping I could find some Nerf burgers at Dex's when I saw it, the 602 Club. I can't tell you how I got there. The gentleman and the lovely lady there kept insisting I was no longer on Coruscant. But no matter, I found this quaint little club in the place they called, quote-unquote, Earth. It was, far better than any Nerf burger. I'd love to go as far as to say that this show they put out, this thing they called a podcast, is like a Nerf burger for the soul. P.S. Please don't tell Dex I said your podcast is better than any Nerf burger. He's terribly sensitive about his burgers.
Aw, I love that. Thank you.
I got to give a shout out to Diner Kenobi, because I too have had a fuzzy tauntaun, and those drinks are weird and good. Yeah. They're pretty fantastic. Good reach there.
Definitely the kind of thing you only want to maybe have one, possibly two of. You know, more than that, you're kind of pushing it.
I don't know. It's actually, if anybody's ever been to Oga's Cantina over at Galaxy's Edge, they have something in it, and I don't know what it is. It actually makes your lips tingle and your tongue tingle too. It's bizarre. Wow. But it's good.
Maybe
I
it's
usually
kava.
make people's lips tingle too,
Yeah.
but that's a different story. Anyway.
Oh, goodness. Oh, my goodness.
Oh,
I walked into that one.
yeah.
I apologize, everybody.
Yeah. There you go. Well, we're definitely excited to be here. Thank you so much, Diner Kenobi, for the fantastic review, and we really appreciate that. You can do what they did. Go over to Apple Podcasts and give us a star rating review. Definitely does help the show grow, which is great. We really appreciate that. Of course, you can get us wherever you get your podcasts, and if you're a podcast lover, just make sure you're subscribed wherever you're getting those podcasts, and you'll get the podcast as soon as I drop it. You can find us on Twitter at TrekFM, or on Facebook at facebook.com/TrekFM. We've got the website at trek.fm. We've got our listeners-only discussion group on Facebook. It's called the Babel Conference. If you search for it, you can be let in, and you can talk to listeners from all over the world about the different shows here on the network. And then last but not least, on our website at trek.fm/contact, you can send Christy and I an email. So, I mentioned that I had never seen this movie, so we already got that out of the way. But I'm really interested to hear from both of you, and this isn't on the outline, but I have a feeling that both of you have a long and storied history with this movie. So I'm interested to kind of hear, John, you're the guest, so was this a movie you grew up with, or what is it that you were like, we should talk about this movie?
I encountered this movie when I was a wee lad on television, or maybe somebody rented it on VHS or something. I don't remember specifically. I remember the only thing I can really remember from my first viewing of it was the setup in the beginning, and loving the Duke of New York and the glider landing on the sadly no longer there, World Trade Center. And so that's really my first memory. But yeah, it's a movie that it's no secret that I'm a John Carpenter fan. And John Carpenter in the 70s and the 80s, you had The Fog, Halloween, you had The Thing, you had Escape from New York, you had Prince of Darkness, you had They Live. I mean, the guy was...
You had Escape from L.A.
Yeah. That did happen, didn't it? But no, I mean, Carpenter he was the low budget king back in the day, and if you put John Carpenter's name on something, and I'm fairly certain that his collaborations, Escape from New York and The Thing and Big Trouble in Little China are probably the source of my lifelong man crush on Kurt Russell, where if you put Kurt Russell's name in anything, I'm like, okay, I'll go see it. And it was delightful when he wound up being in the Fast and Furious franchise, because I was like, oh boy, it just got even better. So, yeah. So I just sort of watched it off and on my whole life. Yeah. What about you, Christy?
Mine was a little bit different. I remember way back to when I was probably like 5 or 6. This is another story of my dad. And him saying constantly, "Call me Pliskin." And me being like, why do you keep saying that? As a little girl, I'm like, what's wrong with you? God, you're so weird, Dad. And then, I think he finally let me see it when I was probably like in my teens, like maybe like 15 or something. And, I liked it okay, but I was more worried about other stuff around then, and, finally rewatched it again, recently with my husband. And then, I think maybe my 3rd or 4th time was this weekend for this. So
cool.
That's
I enjoy
awesome.
It. I
yeah,
love Kurt.
How could you not?
This is just one of those that I missed, and I mean, part of that I think is there's a lot of those like early 80s movies. I was born in 79, so this is 81, and therefore just a little bit, obviously, too early for me to be watching this type of film. My parents were really conservative, so I wouldn't have ever seen this film probably ever.
Darn shame.
So I was like, yeah. But yeah, so it was just it was a fascinating experience to sit down, and it always is for me because like always, my goal is like to just try and take the movie for what it is, and obviously I think for me too, it was really interesting thing for me that the last time we did this thing where we talked about a movie that I hadn't seen like this, and I really enjoyed it. So that kind of had me hoping that this would be in that same vein for me as well, just be like one of those that I missed, but that I really end up enjoying. So and hopefully it wouldn't be I basically wanted this to be Predator instead of, Ghostbusters 2.
Yes, I wanted to throw some, before we get into this discussion, I did hear your Ghostbusters 2 discussion, and I have to throw much shame on Matt for not mentioning that on our trip, where we got to go in and tour ILM, there is a picture that exists of me next to the painting of Vigo the Carpathian, giving a double thumbs up.
This is true.
So I've actually been in the presence of Vigo the Carpathian, and doesn't change the fact that Ghostbusters 2 sucks. But it is, I'm interested, Matt.
Maybe, yeah, I think it's because I didn't know Ghostbusters 2 then, so it didn't have as much of a resonance in my brain, whereas for you would have at least,
Yeah, the campy, corny.
Seen it before.
The corny side of it. Yeah, I mean, the thing is, John Carpenter's whole, I don't know, his whole lane has always been the low budget, often overlooked sort of thing. Like The Thing is one of those ones that like that's his big breakout. Everybody knows The Thing. Everybody knows Halloween. But he did a lot of work like Escape from New York that didn't get as much notice. I mentioned already, Big Trouble in Little China, but also Prince of Darkness and They Live. Those are sort of like, he's sort of made cult movies on the fringes there and had the occasional breakthrough, and that's why his name is so well known. But Escape from New York, I think, I'd be interested for your take on it, Matt, specifically because as I revisit it now, I really enjoy the projection of early 80s people when they were viewing what the New York of the future was bound to become.
Yeah.
It's a New York that a lot of people have forgotten about, but maybe rediscovered sooner than they think. But like there is an appeal to it now that functions on that level also because it's sort of like you mentioned Predator. Predator 2 is set a few years in the future from Predator, and it completely plays with the perception of where everybody thought Los Angeles was going to go in like 10 years. And of course that didn't happen, but you watch it now and you're kind of like, boy, people were really grim about the future, man. Like there was what people need to keep in mind, like if you haven't seen this movie and you go back and you watch it, that is one of the things about it is it's telling you what everybody thought New York was just going. It was inescapable that New York was going to be this vast, hellish wasteland that nobody could escape.
Yeah, I like that you're going there, John, because that's something that I thought was really interesting because this movie takes place in the year 1997.
Yes.
And so the story of the movie is that in 1988, there's a massive crime increase in the United States. And because of that, they've turned Manhattan into a giant, maximum security prison with a 50-foot wall that surrounds the island. The bridges are mined. Nobody can get out, and everybody's just sentenced there for life. And basically, they just do whatever the heck they want to do on that island, but they'll never get out. And so, and at the time, at this point in history in this movie, you've got NATO still involved with the Soviet Union. There's the whole threat of true nuclear holocaust really becoming a thing, which is, where the whole thing comes in with the president, and he's traveling with these important papers and trying to make sure that, they're going to hopefully alleviate some of that from being the case. Like he's trying to stop it from happening and becoming a thing. And at this point, too, the Soviet Union has marched across much of Europe. So, like, it's what's fascinating is it's a dystopian movie, but when you have the outlook from 1981, it's not hard to think, like you were saying, that not only would New York go like this, but the possibility that the world could go like this. So it really is. I mean, now you look back at it and it's kind of like an alternate history, because obviously we know by 1988, the Soviet Union is crumbling, but in 81, we had no idea that was going to happen. And so I really think, to me, the very best part of this movie is exactly what you were talking about, John, is that this movie seems to be a clear reaction to the world in which people live right out of the 70s, which were awful. Carpenter even says he writes this as a response to Watergate and the cynicism that follows that. And plus, I mean, obviously, like you said too, New York was not a nice place. I was alive enough in the 80s before Giuliani came in the early 90s and started to clean up New York to know that New York was not the place you really wanted to go. I went there as a kid, but luckily the family that I was visiting there lived in like the brownstones and the nice area, so like I saw the nice New York, not the awful New York. And so people, just like you said, they don't remember the fact that New York wasn't this tourist epic amazing place. New York is more like in that time period is more like San Francisco now, with like people pooping on the street.
I'd say New York people probably envisioned it becoming more like Detroit became than they did anything else. And I mean we're basically just saying the same thing here, just using two different cities as sort of a backdrop for each other. But Christy, I'm curious to know, right? Like I kind of see where Matt's going here, but I see more value than just the future of the past. Because keep in mind, in this timeline, Khan is still launched into space a year beforehand. So, that all lines up with Star Trek history. But where do you land with it? Like, do you see anything besides the sort of historical value of Escape from New York?
Yeah, I actually was telling Matt earlier, I feel like the biggest thing I take from it, aside from that, well, two things. One is that there's hope in spite of all of the darkness around them. That any kind of criminal was being sent there and then sentenced to this life on that island, never being able to leave. But it could be people that murdered someone versus somebody that, like Snake, who just tried to rob a bank. I mean, granted, it was the Federal Reserve, but still, that's like a petty crime. I feel much different than someone who's a serial killer. I feel like those are completely different brain formats. And so I think that, it shows that there's still some people on that island that are not necessarily all bad. They're not the greatest, but they're not all bad.
Yeah, like Brain, and
yeah.
And what I love about Snake, and I wonder sometimes how much John Carpenter accidentally molded part of my psyche, is I enjoy Snake's anarchic bend to it, where every appeal that they try to give him of you could save the country, you could do this, you could mold the world, Snake doesn't care. He's like, it's all going to burn anyway. Who cares? And he's just an anarchist. He's just in it. He is in a sense, I'd say Snake Plissken is sort of a proto comedian from The Watchmen, where he gets the joke, and that's, he's the only one that gets the joke. And I think Carpenter is really good at writing characters like that, bringing a character like that to life, because I think that's an extension even of The Man with No Name. Clint Eastwood's legendary character. I see Snake as very much cast in that sort of tradition.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's kind of a good time to talk about the character of Snake and Kurt Russell. I'm really thankful that the studio did not get their way and make him cast, Charles Bronson, who was too old, or Tommy Lee Jones at that time would have been much younger. But I think I think Kurt Russell really works in the role because he is able to portray this kind of like devil-may-care attitude, like, just F it all, I'm only here for the thrills of like living for the next 60 seconds, because life could be gone in 60 seconds. So that's all that matters is the next 60 seconds. And I just keep living for the next 60 seconds, and the next 60 seconds after that. And so like, I think he portrays that really well. And yet, like at the very end of the movie, when he does this interesting thing of like ripping up the tape, like you can tell that it's not, he doesn't not care about things, right? Like he's doing something that he thinks is better, and so he actually has some sort of like code that would have been interesting. I would have loved to have gotten a little bit. Let me put it this way: I think he's great. John, you're probably going to hate me for saying this, but I think John Carpenter falls into the same category as James Cameron for me, which is he's not always great with character development, and there's not a lot of great character development in this movie for Snake. And I would have loved just a little bit more, because I think it would have brought him to life even more. I think they do a decent job, but I think Carpenter is better at coming up with really cool ideas, but I don't think he's great at executing those ideas with a lot of like feeling. It just feels like an exercise in an idea more so than a fully fledged thing to me.
I will say first and foremost that it's a bit. I think it can be a bit of a Rorschach test for anybody that's listening to the conversation right now, to realize that you say he's like James Cameron, and I say, oh, well, that's a compliment, and you're intending it as a slight. I'm like, comparing somebody to James Cameron isn't a bad thing in my opinion, but that's that let's table that one there. The reason I keep going back to like the low budget thing is like I do think that Carpenter, his entire body of work, with a couple of notable exceptions, is like one step above Corman in terms of budget. And whereas you might see that as a limitation, I see that as somebody who is so comfortable working in that.
Right.
Well,
hold
circle.
on. I got to interject there, because I'm not saying that the budget here is the limitation. I'm saying he's limited by the fact that he's not and this happened in Halloween too. There's no great character development for the characters. They all just kind of play roles in a concept idea, but they don't feel fully fleshed out. And that's what I'm saying. Like, the budget here doesn't bother me at all, because in many ways, as cheesy as some of the like wider shots are and all that stuff, like, the way they were able to execute the production of this movie and make you feel like you're in a bombed out New York, basically, I think that all worked great. That's not the issue. It's more, it has to do with character development.
But where I'm going with that is that I think that contributes to the sense that there is this sacrifice of character for the sake of story, like the execution of concept sort of thing, and some of the limitations that you were speaking of. Whereas I think that Carpenter is the type of director who creates movies that are about how great it is to, like, it's about creating a feeling and capturing an experience more than it is trying to create a 5-movie mythology arc sort of thing. He is saying, hey, let's make a movie, and this is what's going on, and there's this really killer character, and he's going to meet these zany characters along the way, and that completely works. I think that completely works really well here, because this is, and again, I go back to Sergio Leone's sort of thing, where it's like The Man with No Name. You could level the same sort of like criticism, against The Man with No Name, the guy who never says anything, and he grimaces at the camera all the time. It's a spaghetti western cast as a dystopian, futuristic sci-fi thing, and I think that's its entire charm.
I get kind of what you're saying too, John, that maybe it's more about what he wanted the entire film to speak about story-wise than he wanted to do a lot with individual characters. Is that what you're leaning at?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I get that. And I don't know. I just kind of felt too, Matt, like Snake, he's just designed as a more one-dimensional character that he had already given up and was trying, like he was a previously decorated war hero, gave all of that up and was trying to rob the Federal Reserve for some reason. You're immediately going, well, something really just turned his life upside down.
Yeah, he's a war hero.
Because, yeah. So maybe he had like horrible PTSD and he just wanted out. And he was like, you know what? I'll take some money and run. I don't know.
Yeah,
but
I get, so let me compare it then. Forget, my comparison to James Cameron. But so let me compare it to Predator, where I felt like they did a great job of building all the characters in that movie pretty well. And I felt like they gave them enough room to really kind of create something on top of what they told you. I felt like they did a really good job of like allowing the characters to be in situations where they showed you who they were. And that's the thing I don't think that Carpenter is as good at, honestly, in the movies that I've seen that he's directed. Again, like there's just not enough meat on the bone of the characters he's creating to me here, or allowing them to be able to play with different scenes and like give you more. Because I will say this, because we're talking, this is in the Kurt Russell section, but I think Kurt Russell, without him, this movie wouldn't have worked for me at all. I think that he does absolutely everything he can with this role. And just all I'm saying is I wanted more of Kurt Russell to be able to kind of like spread his wings and fly.
But see that's getting to my point, right? Is like this type of movie is about the experience, is about the concept, is about getting to that zone, as it were, where I'm sitting down with a bucket of popcorn, and this is gonna operate as a social commentary on one level, but it's about sitting down and having fun with a great main character that's going to go in, and you're cheering for him at the end to go through all of these great sort of levels and adventures and stuff like that. Not everything needs to be Tolstoy, right? And this is not trying to be that. Like if this were a movie that was trying to be this great sort of epic, I don't know, some sort of great epic character piece, that's out there. You know, like it's trying to be a Apocalypse Now and follow, go down the river and find Kurtz and go on this journey of insanity and what was Vietnam really all about and all of that stuff. But it's not doing that. It's not trying to do that. It's trying to be what it is. And so,
right. I get that.
What it is,
again,
it's incredible.
what I just said though is that Predator is the same story, same type of story. It's the same type of it's about the experience. The characters are larger than life, but they still found a way to make those characters feel more real on the screen than here. So I'm not asking for it to be Tolstoy. I'm just asking to be at Predator level, which I don't think is the pinnacle of character storytelling. I'm just asking for better written characters. That's all I'm asking for. And I feel like everything, especially even Kurt Russell's character, you're on such a base level. I get what you're saying, John, and I'm thrilled that it works better for you. I really am. I'm not saying I hate the movie or anything. I just think, even in the 80s action genre, there are better versions of these type of stories and better versions of these type of characters. Because this is really, in many ways too, this feels so much like a Mad Max type of movie too. Mm-hmm. And so it has that same kind of feel, except it's in the United States instead of in the outback of Australia.
It feels like the original Mad Max or Road Warrior.
Right.
Fortunately,
right.
It doesn't feel like Mad Max Beyond Thunderdome because nothing should.
Yeah.
But although technically he is Beyond Thunderdome, but see that's I really do think it comes down to taste then, right? And it's it's impossible to argue taste.
Absolutely. I'm not saying I'm right and you're wrong at all.
Oh, but see, I
think it is actually a taste thing.
I'm just kidding.
You shush.
No, I won't shush. I am the guest, and I get to throw things around and ruin stuff all that I want to.
So I will say, though, to throw in my 2 cents and stir the pot some more, I do agree with Matt as far as it goes with Maggie, because I wanted her to be more than she was. And I feel like although she got to, shoot some guns and be along for the ride, that mostly she was the girlfriend.
Yeah. No, yeah. But I think that's, in terms of the type of story that this is, it's a feature, not a bug sort of thing. This is the 12-year-old boy sitting down and writing the hard-boiled detective story sort of thing. So I understand.
Definitely the 12-year-old with Maggie.
Well, hey, man, Adrienne Barbeau,
Yeah.
Anybody's going to catch.
That's what I'm saying. She's
because
there
this
because
is
she
what
looks
you
good.
would wear.
Huh?
This is the thing you would wear if, you're in post-apocalyptic Manhattan, right? Would be a V-neck dress.
Please notice that Snake is wearing sleeveless. It's obviously hot weather, right? He's, everybody's moving around.
But he's still wearing pants and combat boots, and those don't breathe.
But those pants are very vital and useful because they carry equipment. You have to make certain...
They're cargo pants.
You have to make certain allowances and those sorts of things. No, I totally get that. And, I think it's just a feature, not a bug sort of thing in this case. It's an unfortunate feature. But I can totally understand that sort of criticism about it. Sure.
Yeah. I think, it's you saying that, Christy, it's definitely a good time to kind of talk about the rest of the cast. And, I think, the character of Maggie, she does everything she has to do for the role. I mean, she's there to look pretty, in the action movie, which is very common at this point in the 80s action movies. But I felt like it was he did a good job of casting people that you've seen in other things and kind of bring some kind of weight to their role without you having to necessarily spend a lot of time with him, like a Lee Van Cleef or Harry Dean Stanton. These people, they immediately are able to play, I think, their characters well. I will say the one I probably responded to the most was I thought Harry Dean Stanton as Brain did a great job of kind of portraying this person, and this is where I think he did a better job than maybe even Kurt Russell did, I thought, of portraying the person who is just trying to survive in this world and yet at the same time not completely destroy everything he believes in, like you were talking about earlier, Christy. I thought he was doing a really good job with that. I was really surprised with his characterization and just what he brought to the screen, I think, just on his own. So he's one that just really stood out to me, and obviously I've seen him in so many things, but I really enjoyed him in this movie. And again, I think he just brought it. And it wasn't like he did anything crazy or anything. He wasn't going over the top. It was actually, I think, much of the time, he very subtle in his portrayal. So I really appreciated, what he brought to the role in this cast.
Yeah, I mean, Stanton's great. He's a go-to. He's absolutely legendary in these character roles. 2 years before this comes out, he's an alien, and so he's right in his niche right there. And I think he's a terrific actor. I mean, if you're going to talk about the performances in the supporting roles, one of the things that will never, ever be topped for me is Isaac Hayes as the Duke of New York. I love the Duke of New York. I think he's number one. And I think I think that it's possible, because now that we are talking about the actors, I think with Isaac Hayes being in there and looking at these performances, I think that it's possible that we're looking at something that's in the vein of the 70s exploitation movies. And so as a result, there's stuff like Death Wish and Shaft and those sorts of things. And that's why I think, Isaac Hayes works so well in this, is because he brings that cachet with him. And he does exactly what he needs to do, which is be low-level cool through the whole thing.
Oh, yeah. And them having him in that almost like conductor-looking jacket. I don't know what that was about. Yeah. And then having the like chandeliers mounted on his car. Yep. I love those touches that they added to make him look like he's ruling New York and everyone answers to him. Yeah, it was weird for me seeing him in this role initially, because before I saw this, I saw Robin Hood Men in Tights. And he was Achu's father. So I had only seen him in a comedy, and then seeing him in a serious role like this, I was like, whoa, he's the bad guy.
Quick sidebar, if you want to see him in a great comedy, I don't know if you've seen, have you, I'm guessing since you don't know him from anything else, maybe you haven't seen I'm Gonna Get You, Sucker? Oh, no. You should see that movie.
I've heard of it, never seen it.
That is a movie that is, in and of itself, a parody of the blaxploitation genre from the 70s, and I think it's pretty darned hysterical. It features a as yet undiscovered Chris Rock in it, in fact. So sorry to go down that detour.
Oh, okay.
That's all just to heap more praise on Isaac Hayes, as it were. So
no, I'm bound to like it too if it's got Chris Rock in it.
Very memorable role in that movie. So, yeah, I mean, the thing is, Donald Pleasance as the president, I think is great. Just having him, I quote all the time. I used to actually have on a mix, so I would hear it fairly regularly. Donald Pleasance just saying, "You are the Duke of New York. You're number one." Like that's such a great scene, and I think that Pleasance himself brings so much energy to his role, that he imbues a lot of fun to what's going on.
Well, and really brings the weight to that moment where Pliskin actually shows some heart and says, what do you feel about the people that died to get you here? And he just kind of, brushes it off like, well, of course I'm grateful for their sacrifice or whatever anyway. Mm-hmm. And so you see immediately Pliskin is reaffirming what he already felt before, which is that he's lost all faith in the president of the United States and in the bureaucracy of the United States. And that's why he shreds the tape. So yeah, I mean, that's just another notch for Pleasance.
Yeah, I thought he did a really great job because he felt to me basically like he was Blofeld. If Blofeld had gotten caught by Bond. Like, he'd be all demure and like, and all that. But really what he's feeling is at the end where he couldn't care less about anybody else, It's just about himself. And I thought he did it at a very, a good job with that. And so, I will say, to me, and I did a little bit of reading just so I could get some background, and it made sense why I felt this way, but the character that I didn't really respond to or didn't really feel like fit in the movie very well, to me, was the cabbie role, Ernest Borgnine. And it made sense because then I read that they had to basically shoot his parts and insert him in. So I get why I felt like this doesn't really seem to fit with the rest of the movie. And so, but I mean, he's goofy and kind of funny. And this is, I think, one of the places where it's like, kind of going back to earlier, it's some of the things didn't quite connect the way they need to for me for the movie to feel it, to make it feel as cohesive as it needed to. And that was a place where it felt like we threw somebody in there for some like comedic relief or something, instead of him really feeling like he had a really meaty role with the rest of it. And part of that too is to get part of it, he just kind of disappears for part of the movie, and then he comes back, and saves them, and it's like, where has he been? So if you start thinking about the logic, it falls apart. And so, yeah, that's one thing where it's like, I think it would have been better if they had kind of like figured out a better way to kind of insert him in. And I don't know if you could at that point because, this is not the age of digital technology and really being able to insert somebody into a movie.
I like him specifically because he is representative. Again, this whole movie is about the idea of New York and where New York is going and what New York has become or is becoming. And he represents that old guard that, because he even says, I decided to stay. He basically says, I decided to stay. It's New York. I'm going to stay here. And so there were people like that in New York. There will always be people like that in New York. This is my home. This is all I've known. I don't care how bad it's gotten. And I know my way around town like the back of my hand. And so again, I think that it speaks more to the, more to the low budget roots of the film in terms of how it goes together. I understand what you're saying, and I'm not dismissing it. But again, I think it's a feature, not a bug. Of this is the type of movie that it's being. This is the type of movie that's being put together. So I don't know. Maybe I'm being too forgiving of it because of X, Y, or Z reason. Maybe I just think if you have a way to cast Ernest Borgnine in your movie, you do. But I think that the cabbie works specifically because he's representative of that old gang that never gives up on the city, no matter how bad it becomes.
And I see that side too. I came in from it not only with that feeling that you had, John, but also that I feel like he's really the heart and the positivity in a movie that I feel like otherwise is a little too deep for me sometimes. Like I think afterward I need a palate cleanser to kind of brighten my mood again.
Yeah, sure.
But he, to me, is like, he's the only death that matters to me in the movie. Like, I actually every time go, "Aw, Cabby." Mm-hmm. And, I think that he shows that, again, not everybody there is all bad. And that he genuinely is just somebody just trying to get by that, like you said, John, feels like this is his home and he can't leave it. And it kind of makes me feel like, since I've never been to New York, that's the kind of cab driver I would want. The guy who knows every back road. He's gonna, take care of you. He's got music on the ready. Yeah. He's a little weird.
Yeah.
Yeah, Christy, no, that was interesting too. And I think, me not necessarily loving the character, I do think that he was really the only death that I was kind of like, and I think part of that has to do with it. Like, he's the only, like, truly nice person. He's actually the only normal person left in New York, and yeah. So I think that's something that at least they were able to do well with that character for me. So, it's definitely good.
Well, there's nothing Ernest Borgnine is ever bad in. He's always good.
Yeah, that's true. So one of the things that I think, again, that actually it really impressed me was how the look and the feel of this movie, I think, especially once they get to New York, once they stop doing all the quote-unquote, they call them special effects to get you there, which just not great. You could probably do way better in your backyard these days. But once they actually get to New York, quote-unquote, and they are actually not filming in New York at all. They're filming in East St. Louis, Illinois, because there were a ton of buildings that had been burned down in this entire neighborhood back in the 70s, and it still looked like that. So it just looked like this burned out New York, basically. And then a lot of those older buildings like you'd get in New York. So by using that, I felt like they really they were able to bring in the reality of like a burnt out New York that you couldn't have asked for it to look better in that sense. Like, I think, John, you were talking about the budget here, and it's like the budget only shows to me when they're trying to do the special effects, the awful glider sequence and stuff that doesn't really make sense because it's a glider and anyway, that the fact that it would be able to circle around and then go up and all, anyway. Mm-hmm. But
wind drafts, Matt.
That stuff doesn't look great. But I mean, again, it's basically a B movie, so I don't have a problem with it not looking great. But this stuff, the fact that they were able to find this type of place to film, it really felt like a creepy, scary place. Mm-hmm. Because it was a creepy, scary place. So, how fortuitous for them that this, unfortunately, this part of St. Louis on the Illinois side, had not been able to be rebuilt by this point. And they're able to use that to full advantage here to create exactly what you'd want this to look like. I can't say enough for how good I thought the movie looked at this point, because it was great. There's never really been, even with as good as the digital set extensions can get nowadays, I don't think, if you're setting for especially a real world city, a place that actually exists, no matter how good the digital set extension is, it's never going to be as good as finding some place that's tactile. And this is speaking as somebody who's a huge proponent and defender of using digital effects wherever it makes sense. But, especially at this time, if they tried to extend this or create this with matte paintings or anything like that, it's going to scream out as fake to you. And on top of that, I think actually that's what you speak to, and what I strongly agree with, is that sometimes a lower budget film is going to find elegant solutions that a higher budget film would have tried to cheat with effects, whereas they had to get creative and actually find a place that worked. And as a result, especially with what I think the tremendous cinematography in this film, really makes it convincing. You believe that you're in a New York that exists at some point in time that is, a horrible hellscape that, I've been to New York many, many times, and I look at it and sure. Okay. That looks like some places that I've been where I've walked. Okay. It's close enough that your brain doesn't strain and say, it's not like when they set, something in the DC Metro subway system and they go underground and you're like, that's not DC Metro. Like, this is close enough where you're like, okay, yeah, I buy this. This is some corner of New York I haven't seen quite yet.
And even the way that they've done the lighting throughout the whole thing, with it being mostly very dim and having the fires everywhere. And then even when Brain is taking him to go find the president and he says, down by the third campfire, I like that they give it those extra little pieces to make it even more like it's this completely anarchy kind of world. I really think too that it's interesting seeing like the behind the scenes stuff of how they made this happen, because they actually said, I don't know if you guys knew, that they paid a guy to go and on an all expense paid trip to find the worst city in America.
Congratulations, East St. Louis.
And then this is, yep. at least at that time. So sorry, St. Louis. But it also is kind of sad if you think about it, because I hope that maybe East St. Louis has gotten better since then.
I don't know. I can't speak to that authoritatively, but I do know that, you talk about the guy that went on the all expense paid trip to find the worst city. And I just have to think that's got to be one of those things where you're thinking to yourself, oh boy, I'm working in oh, wait, what am I going to do?
Right. These are the places you're going on your entire trip.
I'm purposely going to drive down streets where I could get shot. Great. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Where there's bars on windows. Yeah. Okay.
Bars on bodies in streets more than bars and windows.
I'm still does sound like the worst assignment you could get for a movie.
Though, I will say that most likely inner city Baltimore should have won if they were simply going for worst city. But they had to find someplace that looked like New York.
Well, John, you want to be able to finish filming the movie.
This is an excellent point, Matt. That's a very good point.
So I wanted to ask you guys something, because, the whole point of what they're trying to save is not just the president, but the fact that the president is going to be offering as basically a peace offering to the Soviets the secret to nuclear fusion, which is hopefully going to alleviate and ameliorate this whole problem of this Cold War, because it will give everybody, basically perpetual power, right? A safer, cleaner version of power to which people can have, and they won't be fighting anymore. And of course, at the end of the movie, we already talked about, Snake rips up the real tape, and so I just wanted to ask you guys about that, because, like you said, John, earlier, is he just that much of an anarchist? Or, I mean, it seems like, if you want the world to be any kind of a better place, peace would be a good place to start. And this is one of the things I kind of would have loved there be more of in the movie, that, we have this United States police force, right? The country has become much more quote unquote fascist, and that they've really cracked down because of the crime wave, and like it has really become a police state, and like all of these things. And it just seemed like a strange place to leave the movie, that our main character would be basically sabotaging peace regardless of whether or not the president's a dick.
Yeah, but that's what I think the appeal of Snake is the president being who he is the final confirmation for him that Snake is the guy.
The world's not worth saving?
Yeah. That Snake is a decorated war hero who's become a high-end criminal, basically, right? And so his worldview is communicated in that action, which is, the thing I was fighting for doesn't exist, so why would I try to preserve it? Let it burn. And that's that. I mean, I won't lie. That's the appeal of Snake Plissken, is he delivers a judgment, and he's not righteous about it. He doesn't give a big speech or anything. It's like, Oakley, and he just walks off, and the world's going to burn. He doesn't care. It's, because it kind of deserves it. And again, it gets that whole thing where he's like the proto-comedian. I'm down with that, man. I don't know. Yeah.
He got his answer. I mean, and I think that it's so right along the lines exactly with, why Carpenter was saying that he wrote this, was that it's representing all of these people's viewpoint, that before Watergate happened, people were much more patriotic and had this belief that the president had our best interest at heart, and that we were going to work together towards something, and it's going to be good. And then that happened, and it's like, who is on our side anymore? Mm-hmm. And who can we trust that's running our country? And so I like that Snake is really that person that's sort of representing all of us and saying, well, apparently I can't trust you.
Yeah. And the thing is, why would you save the thing that is broken? Sometimes you just got to let it fall, and then something better comes along. eventually.
Or maybe, and I'll be the one little glint of hope, maybe they will figure it out without the tape.
Nah. I stand with Snake. Hashtag I stand with Snake.
Yeah, no, I think there's a really interesting thing to think about there, and it's one of the things about the movie, it with the little glimpses that they kind of give you of what things are like. You know, is this worth saving, or does it need to all burn to the ground? You know, and we hopefully get something else. You know, whoever survives creates something better, maybe. You know, so Snake is the original Burning Man, and he just wants it all to burn to the ground. And I, you know, there's also this thing in me too. It's like, if the world has gotten this bad, everybody's complicit in that. So like, how do you save a world where everybody is allowed this to take place? Like, because, you know, the crime wave that happened in the movie, you know, it's 400%. Like 400% rise in crime means pretty much everybody in the United States is a criminal. Mm-hmm. Like, you know, that's massive. You know, and it doesn't seem like it seems like it's a problem across not just in the United States, but more around the world too. So it's like everybody is complicit in this type of behavior. Who do we save, and why do we save all of that? Yeah, so I get that. I like the way talking through it definitely helped me appreciate that even more then.
Well, I mean, and it's definitely John Carpenter's worldview. The guy's always been, he's always been a bit of a poison pill. You know, you look at Escape from New York, you look at They Live, even what he was trying to do with Escape from LA. And you go through and you see, I mean, even The Thing doesn't exactly say a great thing. He doesn't have the greatest view of humanity, basically. And I think that that a movie like Escape from New York is him working out that bad blood and, you know, basically putting it on display for everybody.
Now we got bad blood. I'm sorry, I was going all Taylor Swift. My bad.
Shame on you. How dare you? You know what? That's what the tape was. If they made this nowadays, if they made it nowadays, he would have swapped it with Taylor Swift's Bad Blood. There you go. We've got the remake. We've got it figured out.
Oh man, that's hilarious.
You know,
okay.
Listen, I know this is a detour, but I said the word remake. Sorry. There was talk for many years, I don't know if the talk is still there, of remaking Escape from New York. And there was an interview where somebody asked Kurt Russell, they said, you know, would you ever be in it? And he said, yeah, they offered me the role of the president. I told him to go to hell. He's like, I'm not interested in doing that. No, I made the movie I wanted to make back then. I don't want to. No, you make your own movie. And I was like, wow, all right, Kurt Russell, big notch, big plus in his column there. So, but
and that maybe especially he would not want to play the president.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no, you don't. Maybe you make him the Duke of New York. I don't know.
Yeah. Not that one.
If you want to bring him back, make him Brain at least. But yeah.
Yeah.
Or just a really grizzled Snake Plissken, you know? So, I'd buy that.
Escape from New York too.
Snake goes back.
Yes.
Snake harder.
Yeah. I like it. See? There we go. We got Bad Blood by Taylor Swift. We got a title. We could get Kurt Russell
Snake
back.
With a
there you go.
There you go.
We are
Escape from New York. Bad Blood. Snake harder.
There you go. Perfect.
Oh man. Okay, so I'm interested to see where you guys are then in the ratings for Escape from New York.
John, do you want to go first? Oh, sorry.
You go first, Christy, please, by all means.
Okay. So, you know, I haven't seen it a million times, but a few. And although I do feel like it's a bit of a, you know, like you were saying, John, more of a pessimistic view of humanity, I still think it's rewatchable and relevant even through what we're going through now, to, you know, help us remember what's important. And so I feel like it also has that little bit of heart here and there, like I said, with Cabby, and with Snake's decision, even though it ends up being a, you know, I want to see the world burn decision. It comes from a good place, I think. But ultimately, I would give it a 7 out of 10 snake tattoos because I still really enjoy it for all of those reasons. And then I meant to add in, I enjoy it because of the performance of Romero, the Duke's right-hand man, who was so weird.
Yes. I love it. Good call out. Listen, we all know where I'm going to end with this.
You love it.
I love this movie. I'm always going to love this movie. And you know what? If you want to psychoanalyze it and say it's because I love exploitation movies, if you want to say it's because I have a weakness for low budget fare or this or that,
and Kurt Russell,
come on, it's Kurt Russell,
and I do too. It's okay. He was
the man
hot.
who was almost Han Solo. Come on,
yep.
And there's just so much cheeky charm about it and such a time capsule aspect. In terms of the overall movie making, probably, you mentioned Predator earlier, Matt. This is like Predator, where my brain will say one thing, but my heart will say another. And my heart will always give it 4.5 stars because I will always giggle at the end. I will always love Cabby. I will always love him saying in the beginning, "Call me Snake." And then at the end, when Lee Van Cleef is trying to form a partnership with him, he goes, "The name's Pliskin." He's just being that guy. He's just always going to be difficult about it. And I just, it's got the spaghetti Western feel. It's got the old fashioned pulp novel feel. It just has all of this great feel to it that it, where I sit, it more than makes up for its shortcomings. So that's why I come in at a 4.5.
Yeah, John, your heart just goes on and on and on for 80s action movies, which I can somewhat understand. This has been a music heavy episode, but anyway, I will say, I did not enjoy this as much as I did Predator, unfortunately, but it was definitely better than Ghostbusters 2, so that is always going to be a plus.
Low bar.
And so I would say for me, this is 3 out of 5 stars. And so, it's better than average, but it just barely squeaked over being average for me. And part of that is that I think I've realized I'm not a huge John Carpenter fan for the most part. I'll be interested. I own Big Trouble in Little China because somebody gave it to me for my birthday on Blu-ray. So I don't know if that'll push it over.
We do. I've never seen it.
Oh my God.
There you go.
And I will cut you. I will cut you if you talk bad about that movie. I'm just letting you know ahead of time.
I thought I was going to get cut this episode, but I'm glad I survived. But no, it was fun to watch. And hey, you know what? The best part was it was free on Amazon Prime, so I didn't even have to rent it. Mm-hmm. It was great. So that's a plus right there. It's time though, John, I'm excited to have you here. We're going to do our recommendations. And since you're the guest this week, I would like to know what you're going to recommend.
I am going to recommend a movie that a coworker had recommended to me to watch called Big Wednesday, which is a film starring Gary Busey, Jan Michael Vincent, and I forget the actor's name. He played the greatest American hero, William Catt. And it is a movie that goes through in, I think it's like 3 or 5 year increments. And it follows these friends who are surfers from their teenage years, past Vietnam, into their adulthood and their maturity. And it's a movie which is much more enjoyable afterward than it is during. And what I mean by that is that there's a lot of great photography. There's a little bit of disjointed stuff, but you come to appreciate it because the central performances are really, really strong. But it is a really interesting, almost an answer to American Graffiti from John Milius's point of view. And it's much more about, Lucas's movie was about cruising and the cruising culture. And this is about friends who grew up in the surfing culture and how that got changed as they went up to and beyond Vietnam. And Milius was one of the people behind Apocalypse Now. So you see the surfing in Vietnam aspect work its way into the movie that came out a year after that. And it's really interesting as a result. I do recommend it. I did have to pay for it, so it's not on any services for free that I know of, but I do recommend it.
Awesome.
Nice.
Awesome. Christy, what have you got for us this week?
So I don't know if either of you are fans of the telenovela genre.
Not
I
really.
Can't say that I am, but I'm intrigued.
Okay.
You're going to be even more intrigued when I tell you that I started watching Jane the Virgin.
Oh.
And I was skeptical, but it's actually really interesting because I will say if you don't like telenovelas or like soap operas in general, then you may not like this because it's very reminiscent of that. It really leans into like making puns about that. But the general story is that this girl, Jane, is probably in her late 20s and still living at home with her mom and grandmother and is accidentally fertilized at the gynecologist. Who,
Wow.
The doctor was supposed to be doing in vitro for another patient and accidentally did it to her. And Jane was a virgin. So it's like the Immaculate Conception.
Haha, there you go.
So it's got religious notes to
Nice.
it. And, so it's about this whole journey that she goes through of finding out she's accidentally pregnant and still a virgin and doesn't know what's going on and, is going to be getting married soon and finally meeting her birth father for the first time, who turns out to be a soap opera star.
Huh.
So it's just a really heartfelt story with a lot of funny jokes to it. So I highly recommend it.
Oh, cool. That was on
Awesome.
ABC when it was on, wasn't it?
I think so, and it's now on Netflix.
Okay. Cool.
Was it on ABC? I thought that was the CW.
Nah, I'm pretty sure it was ABC.
No, it's not the CW.
Yeah.
Really?
I wouldn't have heard of it
Wait.
if it was on the CW.
Wait, Jane the Virgin?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm looking this up right now because I got to be right.
Oh, well. There you go. There's a statement to unpack.
Yeah, it is. But we're not going to. It was on the CW.
Oh, you're right. It was. Okay.
And how it must have originally been on ABC. Go scroll a little further down
It's
that
better
page.
than a lot of the CW stuff.
It premiered on October 13th, 2014 on the CW and concluded on July 31st, 2019 on the CW. The reason I know is because I was always watching the superhero shows then, and so I'd always see the commercials for Jane the Virgin. I've never seen it. So
I'm
there you go.
personally very disappointed with myself that I did not know the network, a show which I did not watch, the network on which it aired. I'm very disappointed in myself. Usually I'm pretty good about that.
How dare you, John? How dare you not know your television?
It's a darn shame.
I'm going to recommend, I've been finding this fascinating, and as we are recording this, episodes 5 and 6 are dropping this evening. I've been watching The Last Dance over on ESPN about the last season of the Bulls and their championship run there. It's phenomenal. It's fantastic. It is so interesting to see. Sports stories are always interesting, but this one is really interesting to me because I grew up in that time where the Bulls were amazing. In the 90s, that was prime time for me. One of my best friends was a Lakers fan, so I was pulling for the Bulls. He was pulling for the Lakers in that championship series, and so to me it was just so interesting, and it is interesting to see these massive egos behind these things, but on the court and off the court, and how all that works together and how it doesn't work together. So I really have been enjoying it, and I think it's really well produced. ESPN and Netflix did a great job putting this together, and I'll be interested to see how it wraps up, and they're doing a great job of covering all the main individual players, as well as even people behind the scenes, and then really helping you understand kind of who these people are, and just so interesting. So, and you don't even have to like basketball to be interested in it, because in many ways that team and those people, they transcend basketball. I mean, it's Michael Jordan, That's why we call somebody, oh, he's the Michael Jordan of whatever, because Michael Jordan's literally is the GOAT of basketball. So, it's
except for the
stuff.
person I met, Dr. J.
Now, see, Dr. J, how can you not love Dr. J? Dr. J.
I didn't say I didn't love Dr. J.
Dr. J was on the back of comic books when I was growing up. Dr. J was hawking bubblegum. That was great.
Yeah,
he played at our charity golf tournament.
That's
I have
awesome.
a picture with him.
I love Dr. J.
That's so cool.
But
he's a lot taller than me.
But yeah, Jordan is the greatest of all time. I have been meaning to watch The Last Dance, so I'm glad.
Yeah, I think you'll really like it, John, when you get a chance to check it out. So, it was great to have you back on, John, and I'll hint we do have it in the works to hopefully have you back soon. We were talking behind the scenes of some things that we thought might be fun to talk about since, we're not getting any new movies, but we thought of some other fun movies that we have to go back at, and we'll definitely have to do Big Trouble in Little China as well sometime here before hopefully the theaters reopen and we can get to seeing things like Tenet and Mulan and No Time to Die. So, yeah, that's what I'm telling Corona. I got no time to die. So, anyway, John, where can people find you online before I just completely go off the rails?
Not many places, but you can find me online as Kessel Junkie, offering reviews of my movies that I watch over on Letterboxd and, lurking on Twitter and stuff like that. But you can also find me over on the Nerd Party Network, co-hosting a show with Matt, actually called Aggressive Negotiations, a Star Wars podcast, where we have a grand old time talking about really some fun stuff about Star Wars. So go ahead and check that out.
And you can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok now at Bespin Bell. And in addition to the 602 Club, I do a show with my friend Teresa Delgado called Sabers and Spells. And that's on the Skywalking Through Neverland network. So you can find us on Instagram and Twitter as well at Sabers and Spells. And then I do a little segment called Fashion in 5 on the Star Wars Report once a month about men's and women's Star Wars fashion.
And you can find me on Twitter, Instagram, Letterboxd, and Vero under the name MattRushing02. I'm also here on the network doing The Orb with Chris Jones as we talk about Star Trek Deep Space Nine. Aside from doing Aggressive Negotiations with John Mills, you can also find me on the Nerd Party Network doing Outpost with Drea Kaufman as we talk about Harry Potter each and every week, one chapter at a time. And we're wrapping up the Half-Blood Prince, which is really cool, and we're about to dive into the Deathly Hallows. So we will be continuing our run and finishing our run before we know it. The time has flown by with that podcast. It's been a lot of fun. And then we hope to be back soon, but this has gotten put on pause with everything. Cinema Stories with my good friend Courtney as we talk about films through the lens of faith. But thank you so much for joining us.
And y'all come back now, you hear?
Mm-hmm.